Hello there, Internet. Vinnie D here again, and I'm doing another Vinnie Vents. So today I want to toot my own horn and talk about the psychology in one of my own older works, Nailbat, an anti-bunny story. And spoilers if you haven't read Nailbat, spoilers for the entire damn thing. So if you ever intend to read it, you may want to read it now. I can wait. Okay, you done yet? Well, that was fast. Anyway, I would say that Nailbat at its core is part of the examination that Anti-Bunny makes overall, asking the question of what is identity? Well, Nailbat gets down more to the specifics of it, in that it examines it through the lens of the Freudian theory of the Gestaltic personality. Anyone who's taken Psych 1 might know this one as the ego, superego, and id. And the conflict between the three is what drives Morse's entire character. This conflict becomes quite literal as the story goes on. When you first meet Morse, he is mostly id. He spends a lot of time thinking with his ego, but doing very little of it. His actions are determined by his id, and mainly his self-preservation. Morse is a coward. He lives primarily for his own comfort and his hobbies, even though he knows consciously that maybe he's not doing enough, and he's wrong in only living to satisfy his id. What happens if you strip that away? In his case, he finds out he's dying. He is destined to die within 1 year. When you take away the core drive of the id, and again, your id isn't evil, it's just your base animal desires, and at its core, it's your unconscious mind just trying to keep you alive and do what life forms do. Consume, self-preserve, and reproduce. But when he finds out he can't survive, living is now off the table. This gives him a boost, with id being kind of silenced now, because no amount of acts of self-preservation will stop this. He does what he sees in his ego, and his superego is right, and it takes him a little while to find out how to do this right, until he, of course, runs into Penelope, who is very superego, and that gives his superego the boost he needs to become a hero. As the story goes on, we even have him literally defeating the incarnation of his id, and that symbolizes, as it moves on into the final story, how much his superego has grown. The superego being the internalization of one's ideals and one's society. And a properly developed superego would drive everyone to do what is right, and informs the decisions their ego mind consciously makes. Of course, an overdeveloped superego, which is ultimately what's happening to Morse, is that it completely suppresses the id, and at that point you get the self-sacrificing type, or in sociology known as excessive altruism, in which one's person self-interest is completely lost to the ideal of the greater good and their moral responsibility to society, even to their own self-detriment. Morse's is taken to the extreme, in the end losing his own life, as his superego has now overtaken both his id and his ego, and only his drive as his superego self, Nailbat, pushes him forward to his inevitable end. And you're thinking, well, didn't you write this? Isn't this a superhero story? Well, yes, it is. But Anti-Bunny is also noir. And noir doesn't always have a happy ending. There's an outcome, there's a conclusion, there's a beginning and middle and end, but the ending may not be what's good or what's right, but just what comes of what has happened. In the end, Morris dies remembered as a hero, but he also leaves his wife alone. Though he leaves a child behind, which you might think of as a happy ending, or at least a bittersweet ending, you also have to consider that just like his father, he left his child with a dead hero instead of a living father. So perhaps continuing the cycle in another generation of the superego growing, devouring first the id and then even the ego. In this case, he is no longer the rabbit, the animal seeking to survive, nor the person, the ego, Morse, making his own conscious decisions. He is the superego. He is Nailbat, and only Nailbat, at the core of his character. And that's all I'm saying. Just something I had been thinking about when writing this that I wanted to get out of there. Tell me what you think. This is Vinnie D. Be good.